The rivalry between Daniil Dubov and Hans Niemann led to a high-stakes 18-game blitz match in Moscow held on 7th March 2025. With a unique rule, the loser must answer one question from the winner under a polygraph test. This unusual stipulation stemmed from the 2024 World Blitz Championship, where Dubov forfeited a game against Niemann, citing that he had overslept. The incident fueled tensions, leading to Niemann's challenge and Dubov's demand for a cheating-related polygraph test before any match. In the end, Dubov won 9.5 out of 8.5 score, leaving the chess world wondering, will Niemann take the test? This is round 18th of the Levitov chess. I am your host Bison. So the game starts with d4 and black develops his knight. After this, some developing moves comes and then comes g3, preparing for bishop to g2, then come bishop to e7, preparing for castle, then bishop to g2, and this is called Catalan opening, a very solid choice. It's like playing a Uno but keeping all the draw. For the late test, black grabs the pawn, but white goes for the long-term pressures, and then both sides castled, and after this, queen to a4 attacking the c4 pawn, and then comes a6 preparing for the move b5, and then white captured the pawn, and black strikes towards the center with b5 attacking the queen, and queen backs on the c2 square. Hence further develops his bishop on b7 eyeing the diagonal, and then white develops his bishop on d2 after bishop to e4 attacking the queen. Then Dubov simply brings back his queen on c1 square, c6 by hands solidifying the pawn structure. Then comes e3 adding more defense on the d4 pawn. Then Hans develops his another knight on d7 square. Dubov also develops his knight on c3 attacking the bishop, and then black captured the knight, and after recapture there Hans placed his rook on c8 square covering the c file, maybe preparing for the move c5 in future. Then Dubov brings his knight on e2 square, defending the knight from the further pawn push as well as opening the diagonal for the bishop. Then comes c5 attacking the pawn, but instead of capturing, white plays the best move, which is queen to e1, and clearly the next destination will be a5 square for the bishop targeting the queen. Then Hans bring his queen on b6 square, creating more pressure on the center. Bishop to a5 attacking the queen, then queen moves back on b8. Then white exchanges the pawn and he played bishop to g2, opening the f file for the pawn. Maybe we can see a pawn push in the future. Then black brings his knight on the center by playing knight e5, and clearly you can see that the next destination might be c4 square or d3 square. After seeing this, Dubov brings back his bishop on c3 targeting the both knights. Then Hans pushes his b pawn further attacking the bishop. Bishop goes on d4 asking for bishop exchange, but black played a5 first, supporting his b pawn. Then queen to d1 by Dubov, supporting the bishop as well as opening the diagonal for the queen. Then rook to d8 pinning the bishop, and after this he simply moves his queen on b3 after some captures happen, and then knight to d7. Clearly the next destination might be c5 square, which will hit the queen, and then rook at f goes to c1 asking for rook exchange, but black played queen to b6 defending the a pawn. after queen to d1, then comes knight to f6 by hands, opening the d file for the rook, which pins the knight. Dubov simply unpins it by placing the queen on e2 square. Then comes g6, creating the space for the king to move in case if attacked. Then he continued with h3, covering the g4 square to stop any further replacement of knights. Then Hans marches his a pawn further, creating two connected passers. After this, f4 by Dubov, attacking the knight, and some captures happens, and then knight to d7. Then comes rook to c6, attacking the queen, and after queen moves on b8, then comes rook to c4, attacking the black pawns, attacking the two pawns, then queen to d6, defending it, and after this knight to c6, attacking the rook as well as the pawn, and he simply moves his rook on e8 square, then rook to d4, asking for queen exchange, attacking the queen, and then Hans brings back his queen on f8. But it's better for to keep the queen on c5 square. Suppose if game continues, then white can play rook to c4, attacking the queen again, queen to b5, pinning the rook, and after knight to d4, then queen to a5, and the game will be equal. Suppose if white tries to attack the queen, then simply queen to b5, and you can see that white can't do here too much and the game will be completely equal. Hence, after the move queen to f8, he captures on d4, and then Hans pushes his e-pawn further, asking for pawn exchange, and then Dubov simply played queen to c4, defending the f4 pawn, but this move is a mistake. It's better for white to grab the a4 pawn. Yeah, so now here black has two options. Let's see one by one. Suppose if the game continues with queen to d6, which supports the e-pawn, then comes king to h2, defending the king from any further threat. Then black can play h5, queen to f2, supporting the f4 pawn. Then comes h4, trying to create double pawn on h file, and after this happens, then knight to h5, and after rook to c4, then black can play queen to d3, attacking the rook. Then comes bishop to f1, attacking the queen as well as defending the rook. Yeah, after queen to b1, clearly you can see that white is better, because in next move white will play f5, hitting the g pawn, which is supported by the queen, and in next move white will bring his rook on g5, g file, targeting the king, which will slaughter the black king. But what if after rook takes f4, the black played e takes f4, then white can capture back it with the rook, and after queen to d6, and if game continues like queen to f2 and rook to c8, creating double attack on the knight, and after rook to c4, defending it, knight to b6, attacking the rook. After rook moves, which attacks the queen, then queen to e6, knight to b4, h5, and now you can clearly see that white is in better position. Look at the white pieces, they are very active. White has two passed pawn on the queen side as well as an active rook and an active queen, which can move to the a4 square to further create an attack on the black king. However, in the actual game, after the move queen to c7, then comes queen to d6, supporting the e5 pawn and also preparing to give a check on d1 square. After seeing this, white brings his king to h2 squares, and then Hans strikes towards the king side by playing h5. Then Dubov played rook to b7, targeting the f7 square whenever this d7 knight moves. But instead of rook b7, here white can also continues with knight takes e5, because suppose if game continues, then knight takes e5, f takes e5, rook takes e5, then white can play rook to b7, attacking the f7 pawn, and to defend it, white can simply block the queen's diagonal by rook to e6. Then after queen takes a4, white can grab this pawn, and after rook takes a3, then comes queen to f4. And now you can see that white has two passers on the queen side, and white will be slightly better. In actual game, after the move rook to b7, he simply captured the f4 pawn, and after queen takes f4, white is also asking for queen exchange, and he simply declines and played queen to c5, targeting the e3 pawn. But this move is a mistake, because now white can play this amazing move, which is knight to b8, and if black blunders and capture the knight by the rook, then after rook takes b8 check, knight takes b8 and queen takes f6. Clearly you can see that white is a pawn up, and simply black can't capture this e3 pawn, otherwise black will lose his knight by queen takes h3 suppose, then queen to d8, and you can see that black has to lose his knight. Hence it is not a good move. But after this move queen to c5, instead of this, the better move is to play queen to e6, simply guarding this knight, and then white can't play knight to b8 move. Yeah, so after queen to c5, simply white missed this move and he blundered by queen to d4, asking for queen exchange, but it also hangs the e3 pawn, and hence simply captured this. And after queen takes c5, knight takes c5, rook to e7, asking for rook exchange, and hence accepted this. And then king to f8, attacking the knight, and after knight to c6, then comes knight to d3, attacking the b2 pawn. Then comes b3, he simply moves it, and then a3, bishop to f1, attacking the knight. Then knight moves on c1, attacking the a2 pawn, but white simply defends it by the knight to b4, and then by black played knight to e4, and clearly the next destination of knight will be d2 square, which will hit the bishop. Knight to c2 by white, attacking the a3 pawn. Then comes knight to d2, yeah, attacking the bishop, and bishop moves on c4. And now instead of taking the bishop back, black blundered and he played knight to b1, defending the a3 pawn, but this gave whites to play, yeah, this gave whites to play here, no, after knight to b1, it's better for to take the c4 to take the bishop, because after b takes c4, knight takes a2 and knight takes a3, you can clearly see that this game will be completely equal, because in next few moves black king will march forwards towards the toward this pawn to stop it from the promotion. But in actual game, after knight to b1, he played b4, and now you can see that white started to pawn march, and then comes knight to d2, attacking the bishop. But instead of defending the bishop, Dubov blundered and he captured the a3 pawn. Here, instead of this, it's better for white to saves the bishop on d5. Suppose if game continues, then black will play king to e7, trying to stop the b pawn, but this is of no use, because then comes b5, and after knight to d3, b6, and you can see that this pawn is close to promotion, so that's why king to d7. After this, white can simply grab the pawn, and after knight to e5, which attacks the bishop, that bishop simply moves on d5, and after king to d6, then comes b7, and after knight to d7, trying to stop the pawn, then again simply bishop to f7, and clearly you can see that white will capture these two pawns and then promote his kingside pawns. And now you will understand the importance of bishop due to its long range. But in actual game, after knight takes a3, then comes knight takes c4, knight takes c4, knight takes a2, black grabs the pawn, and from here game is completely equal. Then comes b5, white is trying to promote the pawn, then king to e7, b6, knight to b4, and clearly the next destination of knight will be c6 square, and b7, you can see that the pawn is close to promotion, hence knight to c6 covering the b8 square. Then comes h4 covering the g5 square so that king can't enter, king to e6. Clearly the next destination will be d5 square, and king to g2. Both sides brings their king, and after knight to a5, then you can simply see that black can't take, otherwise white will promote, hence knight to b8 closing the file, and after king to f3, king to c5, king to e4, f6 covering the e5 square to stop the further advancement of the king. And then he gives a check from the knight, and after king to c6, you can see that no one can save this pawn. After knight to b4 check, king takes b7, king to d5, you can see that white will going into e6 square and grab these pawns, g5 by black, then comes g4, and everything was fine till here. But instead of capturing the h4 pawn, Hans blundered and he captured the g4 pawn, because after this simply white will play h5 and no one can stop this pawn from promotion. Instead of this, the better move for black is not to capture from the h pawn, it is to capture from the g pawn. Because why this move saves the game? Let me show you. Suppose if game continues, then white will also capture the h5 pawn, and after this game can continues like h3, black is trying to promote, and after knight to f3 which covers the h2 square, then knight to c6, and clearly black knight will also stops the h5 pawn. And suppose if white becomes greedy and he tries to capture the f6 pawn by playing king to e6, then black can play a beautiful move, knight to d4, and whether white captured the knight or not, no one can stop this h pawn from promotion. Hence the correct move order is not king to e6, it is the move king to e4, keeping the king close towards this h pawn. And after this, black can play knight to e5 asking for knight exchange. Then it is not necessary to exchange. Simply white can play knight to h2 and the game will be completely equal. But after the move h5, then comes knight to d7, king to e6 by Dubov, and clearly you can see that white king will jump on f7 square and g6 square and grab these pawns. After this comes knight to e5, but this is of no use because simply white can capture the f6 pawn, and after knight to f3 then comes knight to e2, and clearly you can see that white knight will stop the black pawns from promotion, and white will promote his h pawn, and hence after this move he resigned. What an amazing game by Dubov. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked this video. Hit that subscribe button for more. I am your host Bison signing off. Bye bye.